Hare Krishna, Panchakalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha Patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So welcome to our reading of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, otherwise known as the Krishna Book, Prabhupada's summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are up to chapter 13, the stealing of the boys and calves by Brahma. So first we'll chant Lord Chaitanya's mantra, which is Prabhupada puts in the introduction to this Krishna book. Krishna, 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 Nacharam. Krishna, 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 Rahimam. Rama, Radhava, Rama, Radhava, Rama, Radhava, Nacharam. Krishna, 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 Om Vishnu Padaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyabari Paschachade Satarane Om Mangyanam Timaranda Shagananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Miritam Jainam Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. So Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, chapter 13, this stealing of the boys and calves by Brahma. Shukadev Goswami was very much encouraged when Maharaj Parikshit asked him why the cowherd boys did not discuss the death of Aghasura until after 1 year had passed. He explained thus, "My dear king, you are making the subject matter of transcendental pastimes of Krishna fresher by your inquisitiveness. It is said that it is the nature of a devotee to constantly apply his mind, energy, words, ears, etc. in hearing and chanting about Krishna. This is called Krishna consciousness, and for one who is wrapped in hearing and chanting about Krishna, the subject matter never becomes hackneyed or old. That is the significance of transcendental subject matter in contrast to material subject matter. Material subject matter becomes stale, and one cannot hear a certain subject for a long time. He wants change. But as far as transcendental subject matter is concerned, it is called Nitya Nava Navayamana. This means that one can go on chanting and hearing about the Lord and never feel tired, but remain fresh and eager to hear more and more. It is the duty of the spiritual master to disclose all confidential subject matter to the inquisitive and sincere disciple. Thus, Shukadev Goswami began to explain why the killing of Aghasura was not discussed until 1 year had passed. Shukadev Goswami told the king, "Now hear of this secret with attention. After saving his friends from the mouth of Aghasura and killing the demon, Krishna brought his friends to the bank of the Jamuna and addressed them as follows. My dear friends, just see how this spot is very nice for taking lunch and playing on the soft, sandy Jamuna bank. You can see how the lotus flowers in the water are beautifully blown and how they distribute their fragrance all around. The chirping of the birds, along with the cooing of the peacocks, surrounded by the whispering of the leaves in the trees, combine and present sound vibrations that echo one another. And this just enriches the beautiful scenery created by the trees here. Let us have our lunch in this spot, because it is already late and we are feeling hungry. Let the calves remain near us and let them drink water from the Jamuna. While we engage in our lunch taking, the calves may engage in eating the soft grasses that are in this spot. On hearing this proposal from Krishna, all the boys became very glad and said, certainly, let us all sit down here to take our lunch. They then let loose the calves to eat the soft grass. Sitting down on the ground and keeping Krishna in the center, they began to open their lunch boxes brought from home. Lord Sri Krishna was seated in the center of the circle, and all the boys kept their faces toward him. They ate and constantly enjoyed seeing the Lord face to face. Krishna appeared to be the whorl of a lotus flower, and the boys surrounding him appeared to be its different petals. The boys collected flowers, leaves of flowers, and the bark of trees and placed their lunch on them, as well as in their lunch boxes, and thus they began to eat their lunch, keeping company with Krishna. If you read the Bhagavatam, some put them on bark, and some put them on just in their lunch box and ate out of the boxes, and some put them on leaves of different plants and so on. There's had all different ways of serving it out. While taking lunch, each boy began to manifest different kinds of relations with Krishna, and they enjoyed each other's company with joking words. While Lord Krishna was thus enjoying lunch with his friends, his flute was pushed within the belt of his cloth on his right side, and his bugle and cane were pushed in on the left-hand side of his cloth. In his left hand he was holding a lump of food prepared with yogurt, butter, rice, and pieces of fruit salad, which could be seen through his petal-like finger joints. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who accepts the results of all great sacrifices, was laughing and joking, enjoying lunch with his friends in Vrindavan. And thus the scene was being observed by the demigods from heaven. As for the boys, they were simply enjoying transcendental bliss in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At that time, the calves that were pasturing nearby entered into the deep forest, allured by new grasses, and gradually went out of sight. When the boys saw that the calves were not nearby, they became afraid for their safety, and they immediately cried out, "Krishna!" Krishna is the killer of fear personified. Everyone is afraid of fear personified, but fear personified is afraid of Krishna. By crying out the word Krishna, the boys at once transcended the fearful situation. Out of his great affection, Krishna did not want his friends to give up their pleasing lunch engagement and go searching for the calves. He therefore said, My dear friends, you need not interrupt your lunch. Go on enjoying. I'm going personally to find the calves. Thus Lord Krishna, still carrying the lump of yogurt and rice preparation in his left hand, immediately started to search out the calves in the caves and bushes. He searched in the mountain holes and in the forest, but nowhere could he find them. At the time when Aghasura was killed and the demigods were looking on the incident with great surprise, Brahma, who was born out of the lotus flower, growing out of the navel of Vishnu, also came to see. He was surprised how a little boy like Krishna could act so wonderfully. Although he was informed that the little cowherd boy was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he wanted to see more of the Lord's glorious pastimes, and thus he stole all the calves and cowherd boys and took them to a different place. Lord Krishna, therefore, in spite of searching for the calves, could not find them, and he even lost his boyfriends on the bank of the Jamuna, where they had been taking their lunch. So, in other words, he went looking for the calves, couldn't find them, went back to where the boys were. They were gone too. In the form of a cowherd boy, Krishna was very little in comparison to Brahma, but because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he could immediately understand that all the calves and boys had been stolen by Brahma. Krishna thought, Brahma has taken away all the boys and calves. How can I alone return to Vrindavan? The mothers will be aggrieved. Therefore, in order to satisfy the mothers of his friends, as well as to convince Brahma of the supremacy of the personality of Godhead, he immediately expanded himself as the cowherd boys and calves. In the Vedas, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has already expanded himself into so many living entities by his energy. Therefore, it was not very difficult for him to expand himself again into so many boys and calves. He expanded himself to become exactly like the boys, who were of all different features and facial and bodily constructions, and who were different in their clothing and ornament and in their behavior and personal activities. In other words, although each boy, being an individual soul, had entirely different tastes, activities, and behavior, Krishna exactly expanded himself into all the different positions of the individual boys. He also became the calves, who were all also of different sizes, colors, activities, and so on. This was possible because everything is an expansion of Krishna's energy. In the Vishnu Purana, it is said, Parasya Brahmana Shaktihi. Whatever we actually see in the cosmic manifestation, be it matter or the activities of the living entities, is simply an expansion of the energies of the Lord, as heat and light are different expansions of fire. Thus expanding himself as the boys and calves in their individual capacities, and surrounded by such expansions of himself, Krishna entered the village of Vrindavan. The residents had no knowledge of what had happened. After entering the village of Vrindavan, all the calves entered their respective cowsheds, and the boys went to their respective mothers and homes. The mothers of the boys heard the vibration of their flutes before their entrance, and to receive them they came out of their homes and embraced them. And out of maternal affection, milk was flowing from their breasts, and they allowed the boys to drink it. However, their offering was not exactly to the boys, but to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had expanded himself into such boys. This was a chance for all the mothers of Vrindavan to feed the Supreme Personality of Godhead with their own milk. Therefore, not only did Lord Krishna give Yashoda the chance to feed him, but this time he gave the chance to all the other elder gopis. All the boys dealt with their mothers as usual, and the mothers also, on the approach of evening, bathed their respective children, decorated them with tilak and ornaments, and gave them necessary food after the day's labor. The cows also, who had been away in the pasturing ground, returned in the evening and called their respective calves. The calves immediately came to their mothers, and the mothers began to lick the bodies of the calves. These relationships of the cows and the gopis with their calves and boys remained unchanged, although actually the original calves and boys were not there. Actually, the cows' affection for their calves and the elder gopis' affection for their boys causelessly increased. Their affection increased naturally, even though the calves and the boys were not their offspring. Although the cows and the elder gopis of Vrindavan had greater affection for Krishna than for their own offspring, after this incident, their affection for their offspring increased unlimitedly, exactly as it did for Krishna. For 1 year, continuously, Krishna himself expanded as the calves and cowherd boys and was present in the pasturing ground. As it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's expansion is situated in everyone's heart as the Supersoul. But in this case, instead of expanding himself as the Supersoul, he expanded himself as a portion of the calves and cowherd boys for 1 continuous year. One day, a few days before a year had passed, Krishna and Balaram were maintaining the calves in the forest when they saw some cows grazing on the top of Govardhan Hill. The cows could see down in the valley where the calves were being taken care of by the boys. Suddenly, on sighting the cows began to run toward them. They leaped downhill with joined front and rear legs. You see how they run, you can see that. The cows were so melted with affection for their calves that they did not care about the rough path from the top of Govardhan Hill down to the pasturing ground. They approached the calves with their milk bags full of milk, and they raised their tails upwards. When they were coming down the hill, their milk bags were pouring milk on the ground out of intense maternal affection for the calves, although they were not their own calves. These cows had their own calves, and the calves that were grazing beneath Govardhan Hill were larger. They were not expected to drink milk directly from the milk bag, but were satisfied with the grass. Yet all the cows came immediately and began to lick their bodies and the calves also began to suck milk from the milk bags. There appeared to be a great bond of affection between the cows and the calves. When the cows were running down from the top of Govardhan Hill, the men who were taking care of them tried to stop them. Older cows are taken care of by the men, and the calves are taken care of by the boys. As far as possible, the calves are kept separate from the cows so that the calves do not drink all the available milk. Therefore, the men who were taking care of the cows on the top of Govardhan Hill tried to stop them, but they failed. Baffled by their failure, they were feeling ashamed and angry. They were very unhappy. But when they came down and saw their children taking care of the calves, they, all of a sudden, became very affectionate toward the children. It was very astonishing. Although the men came down disappointed, baffled, and angry, as soon as they saw their own children, their hearts melted with great affection. At once their anger, dissatisfaction, and unhappiness disappeared. They began to show paternal love for their children, and with great affection they lifted them in their arms and embraced them. They began to smell their children's heads and enjoy their company with great happiness. After embracing their children, the men took the cows back to the top of Govardhan Hill. Along the way, they began to think of their children, and affectionate tears fell from their eyes. When Balaram saw this extraordinary exchange of affection between the calves and between the fathers and their children, when neither the calves nor the children needed so much care, he began to wonder why this extraordinary thing had happened. He was astonished to see all the residents of Vrindavan so affectionate to their own children, exactly as they had been to Krishna. Similarly, the cows had grown affectionate to the calves as much as to Krishna. Balaram therefore concluded that the extraordinary show of affection was something mystical, either performed by the demigods or by some powerful man. Otherwise, how could this wonderful change take place? He concluded that this mystical change must have been caused by Krishna, whom Balaram considered his worshipable personality of Godhead. He thought it was arranged by Krishna, and even I could not check its mystic power. Thus, Balaram understood that all those boys and calves were only expansions of Krishna. Balaram inquired from Krishna about the actual situation. He said, "My dear Krishna, in the beginning I thought that all these calves and cowherd boys were either great sages and saintly persons or demigods, but at present it appears they are actually your expansions. They are all you. You yourself are playing as the calves and boys. What is the mystery of this situation?" Interesting, he knew they weren't the boys, but he thought they were sages and saintly persons or devas. And now you find out, no, more than that, they were Krishna himself. What is the mystery of this situation? Where have those other calves and boys gone? And why are you expanding yourself as the calves and boys? Will you kindly tell me? What is the cause? At the request of Balaram, Krishna briefly explained the whole situation, how the calves and boys had been stolen by Brahma, and how Krishna was concealing the incident by expanding himself so people would not know that the original calves and boys were missing. This next part is very interesting. While Krishna and Balaram were talking, Brahma returned after a moment's interval, according to the duration of his life. We have information of Lord Brahma's duration of life from the Bhagavad Gita, 1,000 times the duration of the 4 ages, or 1,000 times 4,320,000 years, constitutes Brahma's 12 hours. Similarly, 1 moment of Brahma's time is equal to 1 year of our solar calculation. After 1 moment of Brahma's calculation, Brahma came back to see the fun caused by his stealing the boys and calves. But he was also afraid that he was playing with fire. Krishna was his master, and he had played mischief for fun by taking away his calves and boys. He was really anxious, so he did not stay away very long. He came back after a moment by his calculation. He saw that all the boys and calves were playing with Krishna in the same way as when he had come upon them, although he was confident that he had taken them and made them lie down asleep under the spell of his mystic power. Brahma began to think, all the boys and calves were taken away by me, and I know they are still sleeping. How is it that a similar batch of boys and calves is playing with Krishna? Is it that they are not influenced by my mystic power? Have they been playing continually for 1 year with Krishna? Brahma tried to understand who they were and how they were uninfluenced by his mystic power, but he could not ascertain it. In other words, he himself came under the spell of his own mystic power. The influence of his mystic power appeared like snow in darkness, or a glowworm in the daytime. A glowworm, if you haven't seen them, they're lightning bugs, and even their larva shines. So that's a glowworm. So the influence of his mystic power appeared like snow in darkness, or a glowworm in the daytime. During the night's darkness, the glowworm can show some glittering power, and the snow piled up on the top of a hill or on the ground can shine during the daytime. But at night the snow has no silver glitter, nor does the glowworm have any illuminating power during the daytime. Similarly, when the small mystic power exhibited by Brahma was before the mystic power of Krishna, it was just like snow at night, or a glowworm during the day. When a man of small mystic power wants to show potency in the presence of greater mystic power, he diminishes his own influence. He does not increase it. Even such a great personality as Brahma, when he wanted to show his mystic power before Krishna, became ludicrous. Brahma was thus confused about his own mystic power. In order to convince Brahma that all those calves and boys were not the original ones, the calves and boys who were playing with Krishna transformed into Vishnu forms. Actually, the original ones were sleeping under the spell of Brahma's mystic power, but the present ones, seen by Brahma, were all immediately expansions of Krishna, or Vishnu. Vishnu is the expansion of Krishna, so the Vishnu forms appeared before Brahma. All the Vishnu forms were of bluish color and dressed in yellow garments. So here all the calves and calves turn into these four-handed Vishnu Murtis. All the Vishnu forms were of bluish color and dressed in yellow garments. All of them had 4 hands, decorated with club, dish, lotus flower, and conch shell. On their heads were glittering golden helmets inlaid with jewels. They were bedecked with pearls and earrings and garlanded with beautiful flowers. On their chests was the mark of Srivatsa. Their arms were decorated with armlets and other jewelry, and their necks were just like conch shells. Their legs were decorated with bells, their waists with golden belts, and their fingers with jeweled rings. Not simple cowherd boys, right? Brahma also saw that upon the whole body of each Lord Vishnu, from the lotus feet up to the top of the head, fresh tulsi leaves and buds had been thrown. Another significant feature of the Vishnu forms was that all of them were looking transcendently beautiful. Their smiles resembled the moonshine, and their glancing resembled the early rising of the sun. Just by their glancing, they showed themselves. If you see the text, the pronouns are all themselves capitalized now. Just by their glancing, they showed themselves to be the creators and maintainers of the modes of ignorance and passion. Vishnu represents the mode of goodness, Brahma the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva the mode of ignorance. Therefore, as the maintainer of everything in the cosmic manifestation, Vishnu is also the creator and maintainer of Brahma and Lord Shiva. After this manifestation of Lord Vishnu, Brahma saw that many other Brahmas and Shivas and demigods and even insignificant living entities down to the ants and very small straws, all moving and non-moving living entities, were dancing, surrounding Lord Vishnu. Their dancing was accompanied by various kinds of music, and all of them were worshipping Lord Vishnu. Brahma realized that all those Vishnu forms were complete in mystic power, from the anima perfection of becoming small like an atom, up to becoming infinite like the cosmic manifestation. All the mystic powers of Brahma, Shiva, all the demigods, and the 24 elements of cosmic manifestation were fully represented in the person of Vishnu. By the influence of Lord Vishnu, all subordinate mystic powers were engaged in his worship. He was being worshipped by time, space, the cosmic manifestation, reformation, desire, activity, and the 3 qualities of material nature. Lord Vishnu, Brahma also realized, is the reservoir of all truth, knowledge, and bliss. He is the combination of 3 transcendental features, namely eternity, knowledge, and bliss, and he is the object of worship by the followers of the Upanishads. Brahma realized that all the different forms of boys and calves transformed into Vishnu forms were not transformed by a mysticism of the type that a yogi or a demigod can display by specific powers invested in him. The calves and boys transformed into Vishnu Murtis, the calves and boys transformed into Vishnu Murtis or Vishnu forms were not displays of Vishnu Maya or Vishnu's energy, but were Vishnu himself. The respective qualification of Vishnu and Vishnu Maya are just like fire and heat. In the heat, there is the qualification of fire, namely warmth, and yet heat is not fire. The manifestation of the Vishnu forms of the boys and calves were not like the heat, but was rather the fire. They were all actually Vishnu. Actually, the qualification of Vishnu is full truth, full knowledge, and full bliss. Another example can be given with material objects which are reflected in many, many forms. For example, the sun is reflected in many water pots, but the reflection of the sun in many pots are not actually the sun. There is no actually heat or light from suns in the pots, although they appear like the sun. But the form which Krishna assumed were each and every one full Vishnu. The specific word used in this connection is Satya Jnananantananda. Satya means truth, Jnana, full knowledge, Ananta, unlimited, and Ananda, full bliss. The glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are so great that the impersonalistic followers of the Upanishads cannot reach the platform of knowledge to understand them. Especially the transcendental forms of the Lord are beyond the reach of the impersonalists, who can only understand through study of the Upanishads that the absolute truth is not matter nor is materially restricted. From Krishna's expansion into Vishnu forms, Lord Brahma could understand by his limited potency that everything, movable and immovable, within the cosmic manifestation is existing due to the expansion of the energy of the Supreme Lord. When Brahma was thus standing, baffled in his limited power, and conscious of his limited activities within the 11 senses, that means the knowledge-acquiring senses, and the instruments of action, karmendriya, and gyanendriya, plus the mind, the 11th sense. That's why there are 11. When Brahma was thus standing baffled in his limited power, and conscious of his limited activities within the 11 senses, he could realize that he was also a creation of the material energy, just like a puppet. As a puppet has no independent power to dance, but dances according to the direction of the puppet master, so the demigods and living entities are all subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As it is stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the only master is Krishna, and all others are his servants. Ekala Ishvara Krishna are Sarvyam Pritya. The whole world is under the waves of the material spell, and beings are floating like straws in water. So their struggle for existing is continuing. But as soon as one becomes conscious that he is the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this Maya, or illusory struggle for existence, is immediately stopped. Prabhupada refers to this, the illusory struggle. It's not that you're not struggling, but you don't need to. That's the illusion. Lord Brahma, who had full control over the goddess of learning, who has full control over the goddess of learning, and who is considered to be the best authority in Vedic knowledge. When you see the Murti of Brahma, he has a book in his hands, that's the Vedas. Lord Brahma, who has full control over the goddess of learning, and who is considered to be the best authority in Vedic knowledge, was thus perplexed, being unable to understand the extraordinary power manifested by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the mundane world, even a personality like Brahma is unable to understand the mystic power of the Supreme Lord. Not only did Brahma fail to understand, but he was perplexed even to see the display which was being manifested by Krishna before him. Krishna took compassion upon Brahma because of his inability to see how Krishna was displaying the forms of Vishnu and transforming himself into calves and cowherd boys, and thus, while fully manifesting the Vishnu expansions, he suddenly pulled his curtain of Yoga Maya over the scene. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not visible due to the curtain spread by Yoga Maya. That which covers the reality is Mahamaya, or the external energy, which does not allow a conditioned soul to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead beyond the cosmic manifestation. But the energy which partially manifests the Supreme Personality of Godhead and partially does not allow one to see is called Yogamaya. Brahma is not an ordinary conditioned soul. He is far, far superior to all the other demigods, and yet he could not comprehend the display of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Krishna willingly stopped manifesting any further potency. The conditioned soul not only becomes bewildered, but is completely unable to understand. The curtain of Yogamaya was drawn so that Brahma would not become more and more perplexed. When Brahma was relieved from his perplexity, he appeared to awaken from an almost dead state, and he began to open his eyes with great difficulty. Thus he could see the external cosmic manifestation with common eyes. He saw all around him the super excellent view of Vrindavan, full with trees, which is the source of life for all living entities. He could appreciate the transcendental land of Vrindavan, where all the living entities are transcendental to ordinary nature. In the forest of Vrindavan, even ferocious animals like tiger live peacefully along with the deer and human beings. He could understand that because of the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vrindavan is transcendental to all other places and is free of lust and greed. Brahma thus found Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, playing the part of a small cowherd boy. He saw that little child with a lump of food in his left hand, searching out his friends and calves, just as he had actually been doing 1 year before, after their disappearance. Immediately, Brahma descended from his great swan carrier and fell down before the Lord just like a golden stick. The word used among Vaishnavas for offering respect is dandavat. The word means falling down like a stick. Danda, and vat. Vat is like a stick, like a danda. So Brahma fell down before the Lord like a stick to offer respect. And because the complexion of Brahma is golden, he appeared to be like a golden stick lying down before Lord Krishna. All the 4 helmets on the heads of Brahma touched the lotus feet of Krishna. Brahma, being very joyful, began to shed tears, and he washed the lotus feet of Krishna with his tears. Repeatedly he fell and rose as he recalled the wonderful activities of the Lord. After repeating obeisances for a long time, Brahma stood up and smeared his hands over his eyes. Seeing the Lord before him, he, trembling, began to offer prayers with great respect, humility, and attention. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 13th chapter of Krishna, the stealing of the boys and calves by Brahma. And in the next chapter are prayers offered by Lord Brahma to Lord Krishna. For us to read that chapter, we're going to have to take 2 sessions. It's a long chapter. Brahma had a lot to say.
If anybody has any questions or just comments or little bits of the chapter that they found were interesting or inspiring, feel free to share it in the comment section underneath the video there. And we have a few right now. Kendra Prabhu says, "My obeisances to you and thank you for reading to us. Whenever I hear about Krishna having lunch with all his thousands of friends and how each of his friends manifests different relationships with him, I've always wondered whether Krishna expands himself in the company of his cowherd friends the way he does with the gopis."
Yes, he does. He expands himself, in this case, that way.
I seem to remember seeing a painting of that too, where it's like each cowherd boy sitting next to Manifestation Krishna.
And if you take an infinite set and you break it down into pieces, each piece is still infinite. That's just the mathematics of transfinite numbers. So half of infinity is infinity, 1/10,000th of infinity is infinity, and so on. So they're all complete. Therefore, they're larger and smaller infinities too.
I always, when people kind of wonder how Krishna can expand like that, it makes me remember that that's happening every day as we sit and chant our japa. That Krishna is with each one of us. In the
It does,
holy name.
He's in his Krishna and Krishna's name are the same. So,
In a complete way.
In a complete way, then fully there.
And Gaura Shakti Prabhu says, "And whenever I hear about eating lunch with Krishna, I think about all those years in school where I thought I was at the cool table for lunch and realized I wasn't even close." Do you have a comment? Wait a second here. I'll hold this.
It always says that they're holding what they're eating in their left hand, and we always, hear about prasadam in the right hand. So I just wonder if you would comment on that. It mentions it a few times. They make a point of saying the left hand.
Yeah. I assume they had morsels in one hand and were eating with putting the other to their mouth. They used their left hand.
Thought,
yeah. Anyway, they're pure. And, on the other hand, rural people are, a little less formal, a little scruftier anyway. So that's another thing.
On that topic, Madhavendra Puri Prabhu said, "Did anyone get the recipe for Krishna's lefty food? I always find this pastime so sweet and relatable. Nothing like a lunch at the river with your friends and homemade lunches."
That's right.
And then Kendra Prabhu says, "You mentioned that you found the portion of the pastime describing Brahma coming under the control of his own mystic potency particularly interesting. I'd be interested to hear any further thoughts you may have on this, should you care to share them."
I don't. I just thought it was wonderful that he could be entranced by his own mystic power. That's all. This is really, uh, we don't have that much experience with mystic powers and how they work, and Brahma is a very far out person. We have a four-headed Brahma because we're in a small universe. He has a head for every dimension of the universe. So when there's so many heads of Brahmas and so many Brahmas, how does that work? How do you fit 100 heads on one neck? But so these things are not available to us with our limitation of 3 spatial dimensions. It would seem that there were many, many more spatial dimensions that they had, material spatial dimensions, by the way, that they had access to. They're there in mathematics, and they need them for doing certain things, but we are very limited. You don't have the passport. You can't go to the next level.
When Krishna was manifested as the cowherd boys and the calves, was that an opportunity for the cows and the gopis to act in Vatsalya rasa without directly being Krishna's parents?
Somehow, yeah, they had, yeah, it was some kind of exchange. The relationship of a child to its parents is actually a servitorship.
Oh, right.
That we don't think of it that way, but because
this was the parents to Krishna.
But parents to Krishna is different. That's parental.
Yeah.
But they would also have the other way would be servitorship. That somebody who maintains you, takes care of you.
Yeah. David Arana says, absolutely ecstatic. Hare Krishna, please accept my most humble obeisances. I thank you so very much for reading this. Surely I am blessed. I hope so.
We all are.
And Kendra Prabhu says, I have heard Gopi Pranadana Prabhu mention Krishna's holding food in his left hand. He said it made Brahma all the more bewildered at how this village boy could be supreme.
They are rustic people, huh? Yeah, they're not so careful, huh?
And Adi Devi says, Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances with a prayer hands emoticon. And Gaura Shakti says, thank you so very much for tonight's reading, Gurudev. Prayer hands and a heart emoticon. And Akanta Bhakti says, thank you, Gurudev, with the prayer hands emoticon.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
I wonder why when Krishna killed the demon that was pretending he was a cow, he came into the herd.
Mm-hmm.
There was never any repercussions because he killed a cow. I mean, in other instances, like he treated Putana like a real mother, and when Balaram kills a cow, a bull, he has to go for a year of penance and stuff. But in this case, there was no repercussions that we know of.
That we know of, yeah.
I think it was brought up somewhere. I can't remember. I'd have to look again, but I think there's some mention.
Somewhere, huh?
Something of that.
Yeah.
And Adi Devi says, thank you for addressing the relationship of child to parent as servitorship.
Supposedly.
That's all the comments. Before we break, I just want to let everybody know that There'll be another class a special class on Thursday morning, Eastern Time. I think it's 7:50 a.m. Eastern Time. Ravindra Svarupa will be giving Bhagavatam class, actually on the story of Putana, as we just heard a few weeks ago. And I'll email out the Zoom details for that. I'll put it on Facebook also for the details of connecting to that. And then there's Sunday is the regular first canto class, and then the weekend of July 4th, there'll be some special classes on japa, because Ravindra Svarupa would take part of a Holy Name Festival of the Holy Name retreat with Ramapada Swami that will be online. And we'll send out the details about that once we get them. But there'll be a few classes given on Shikshastakal and the process of knowledge. Bhakti is a process of knowledge. Those are the announcements.
Okay, very good. So, anything else? That's it? All right, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Krishna book ki jai.